Grandma, can you tell me when you were born?
When or where?
When?
I was born when? April the 17th, 1927,
And where was that?
Minneapolis.
In Minneapolis. Okay. Can you tell me about your parents?
Well, I don't know too much about them at that time because I was too small, but my dad was a butcher, and he worked in a butcher shop on Lake Street in Minneapolis. And then he decided to go out on his own. So he bought the place in Maple Plain. And my dad was trained as a butcher, but he bought the store and ran it as a regular, sold all kinds of groceries and everything, not just meat. But he had a good meat section, and he went into Minneapolis and got his supplies himself. And we lived then kitty corner across the street in another store that was empty. And my mother was a really good sport. And Dad rented that store because there was no houses in town to rent. And then my dad built a place onto the store so we could live there. And it was just, well, first he built it. When he started building it, he said it was going to be a beer parlor. And so he made it long and narrow. And there was supposed to be booths on each side. By the time he got it done, he changed his mind and made it into a house for us. So we had a living room, dining room, kitchen, and one bedroom. And so I slept on the davenport that opened up, and they were in the bedroom. I had 3 brothers. 2 were older than I was. They were, my brother Bob was 11 years older than I was, and Harry was 12 years older than I was.
Oh, wow.
And then my brother Dick was 6 years younger than me. So there was quite a span in our ages. And small town was new to me, but lots of kids, and I ran and played and was happy as a lark.
Your favorite present?
Huh?
Your favorite present?
Oh, my favorite present. Yeah, it was I wasn't quite 6 years old, but they bought me a 6-year tricycle, it was called. And the front wheel was a lot bigger than the tricycles are now. And my brother Bob could ride it, who was 10 years older than I was. But yeah, it was a hit. And living in the store, we had room to ride the tricycle in the front. And my mother, we would ride the tricycle around the dining room table, around the living room furniture. You know, that was our recreation all day. It never bothered my mother at all. She was not a nervous person. You're going to ride your trike, ride it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it got to be nice weather out, we had an empty lot beside the building. McGarry's, where McGarry's was.
Mm-hmm.
That was all empty. And so we could go out there and play. And that was the way it was. Kids would come from all over to ride my trike because it was bigger. And even an adult could ride it. My big brothers rode it, and it was really a great trike. Bob and I would hook up his tailor tot and the bicycle. I had at that time they sold bicycles according to ages, sort of. And my mother bought, or my dad bought, it was called a 6-year bike for me, or tricycle it was. But we were living in that store. We had lots of room. We rode that thing, hooked up the tailor tot to it, and I rode my tricycle round and round in the front of the store. That's what Mother used for the living room and dining room. And when I think of it now, I think, my gosh, I would think my mother would have gone crazy. But she didn't. It didn't bother her at all. And we'd play in the house. We didn't even have much of a yard to play in. And Lois was my best friend. She was a year older than I was, Lois Peterson.
What did you and Lois do for fun?
Oh, jump rope and play, do you call it when you bounce a ball and put your leg over it?
Oh.
1, 2, 3, a Larry, 4, 5, 6, a Larry. I can remember the song, but anyway, and I ran the whole town. And any place that had a baby, that's where I was.
You like babies?
So my mother wanted to find me, she just called where she knew the newest baby was, and there I'd be.
Did you ever have any pets?
Oh yeah, we always had pets. Dad had cats because of the mice, in the basement, and the boys always wanted to have a dog, but my mother was against having a dog in the house, and that was the only place for the poor dog to go out of the rain and everything. So they finally quit having pets. My dad bought us a record player, and I loved music. So we had stacks of records, and they were probably mostly, could you give me a Kleenex?
Mm-hmm.
They were probably mostly semi-popular records. He bought us a record player, and that was, to have a record player was different. Most everybody just heard the music that came over the radio, and then when he found out that was a winner, then he bought us a lot of records too. He had a stack of records, and they were, at that time, they were the popular music of the time, but I can't even think of one song now. Whatever was popular in the movies.
Mm-hmm.
And he took us to the movies like maybe once a week.
So did your family have quite a bit of money
No,
compared to other families?
it was just a moderate living.
If you could describe your childhood in one sentence, how do you think you'd say it?
It was a ball. We were included in everything. It wasn't, you stay home and we're going to go somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
They took us everywhere.
Did you and your family ever go on family trips or anything?
My grandmother, my dad's mother, died in California. And I was 6 years old, and we drove to California. That was quite a deal. We bought a new car from Ranger Motors, and we got as far as Battle Mountain, Nevada, and the car crapped out. And Dad rented a little cottage. There was they called them, at that time they called the places, well, it won't come to me, so, but instead of, it was different than the summer places they have now. I can't think what was different about them. Because I was only 6 years old, I didn't know who owned what, or what was going on. But I just did what I was told. Everything, I had a good life.
So you went to California because a family member had died?
Yes, my dad's mother died. My dad bought a new car from Ranger Motors.
What kind of car was that? Do you
It was
know?
a Ford. There were Ford dealers always. And it broke down in Battle Mountain, Nevada.
Did you buy a
Brand
new
new
one
car.
then?
No, he stayed there until they sent somebody to fix it. And so I think we were like 6 weeks or so. I can't remember being 6 years old. I don't really recall, except that we stayed then they called them tourist resorts or something like that.
Mhm.
It was just a place that had a bunch of little cottages, and Dad rented one. The people that owned it had a girl 6 years old, about the same as me. Her name was Henrietta. And from living there just a few days, I learned that there was somebody around that got called home for lunch and home for a nap. And she took a nap out on the lawn. It was in California. So I thought that looked real good. So I took my nap with her, and she and I just were like sisters together for as long as we lived there. I think it was something like 6 months before they got a car for us to drive the rest of the way. By that time, my grandmother had died. But we went there and had the funeral for her, and then we drove back home. But I can't even remember anything about the trip back home. The trip there was so eventful with cars breaking down and things like that. But anyway, we got home and back to Maple Point.
Did you go on any other kind of family trips at all?
Family trip. No, I think that's the only one I can remember because, and that we wouldn't probably have taken hadn't been for my grandmother. And that was the first funeral I ever knew about, and life took on a little different meaning because of that. My grandmother dying and us living in a place I wasn't used to. About 1945, my grandma and grandpa got so old they needed help at home. So mother packed up and or she asked Dad, would you mind if we moved him in? No, he said, I'm glad to. He shut the door of the store in Maple Plain, and they moved into town. And my Uncle Elmer had a restaurant business supply, and he was really glad to have my dad work for him because my dad could fix anything. My dad was more or less an inventor. Yeah. He could make nothing out of something, something out of nothing, if he had the material. And they would take in old restaurant equipment, and my dad would sand it down and paint it and make it look like new, and then they'd sell it. And Uncle Elmer was really tickled to have him work for him because his business would have been nothing if he hadn't had Dad, because there was no new things to buy. And that was the only thing you could sell was something that you cleaned up, painted up, and made it look like new. And people knew it wasn't new, but that was the way the exchange was just used stuff was painted, and lucky you could get the paint, I guess, about that time.
What did your mom do when you lived in Minneapolis?
She stayed home. She was a housekeeper. My grandfather was alive then. He was a deputy sheriff in Minneapolis, downtown. He didn't wear a uniform, but he had a partner. His name was Friend Hamilton.
Friend?
Yeah, I've never known another person named Friend. But anyway, Friend and my grandfather's name was Charles Budd. They were deputies together. Their assignment was usually to go around to some house that had somebody who has gone off their rocker, and they're trying to get him into the hospital, and they fight, they lock the house, and they have to crawl through a window. It was a crazy life. We'd hear what stories they had been through, real life stories. And I went to North High, and that's where I graduated from North High in Minneapolis. So I got a little bit taste of what it was like to live in the city, but it was great. I could walk to school, and the teachers were just as nice as anywhere, and so it was a good life.
Do you like school?
Oh yeah.
What was your favorite subject?
Math.
Really?
And I don't know, I just liked school. I didn't even think about any one subject. I just liked it all. And there were lots of different kind of kids, because we walked to school. We'd meet. I was only 3 blocks away from school, but I'd meet somebody at about the same time all the time and walk the 3 blocks the rest of the way, and I go to work in the afternoon. In fact, I got out early because I had a job. So I'd go home and change clothes and go to work. And then I wouldn't get home until about 11:30. And I had to wash my hair because it smelled like cooking oil. And my mother just about had a fit that I had to wash my hair every night. And I can't sleep on a pillow that smells like that. It's horrible. So I would wash my hair, sleep on a towel, and get up and go to school in the morning and then go to work. And I could walk to any of them. So
What did you wear every day at school on a usual day?
at school, skirt and sweater, blouses, not much slacks. We didn't wear slacks to school. We wore skirts and dresses, Oxford shoes, anklets. Nylons just became new. Can you imagine that? And we thought, boy, we're really lucky that because getting dressed up, you didn't want to wear anklets all the time. And they, we hated those garter belts and stuff like that.
Did you go to any sporting events when you were in school? Did you go and watch football or anything?
I did because I could walk, and there was other kids there, and and it wasn't the it wasn't the interest of every kid like it is now, like they go into football or basketball or something like that. But the ones played were active and admired by the girls. And being I could walk almost anywhere I wanted to go, why, I was on the go most of the time. And it was a good life. It didn't bother me where we lived or anything. There was somebody there to take care of me. And then the war hit. And when our country went to war, all the good men went to war. And I had one boyfriend that went to war, or he didn't go to war, but he went into service. And so that changed everybody's life, when the young men went off to war. As long as he was home on leave, why, we dated. But then he went again. He was gone. And we were back to writing letters, which was dull. But he was moved to California, and he wrote, and I wrote, and that was the only connection we had for quite a while, for several months, which was very hard to do. I wrote, but I hated every minute of it. And he was pretty good at writing, but he too, what do you write when you're in the service doing what you're told to do and having very little time off? But anyway, it went on pretty good. And then he got home on leave. And he borrowed his dad's car again. And we dated. And he was only home for a couple of weeks and he was gone again. And so then he asked if I would marry him. And I did. And when he came back, he wanted me to marry him. And I was just 18. And then we both went away on assignment. We went to, first it was Wisconsin. He was assigned in Wisconsin. And at that time, the Army didn't have a place for you to live. You had to find your own place. And so he he picked up a list of names, and he selected one couple, an older couple that had children about our age, but they had jobs and were working, and we went and stayed in Wisconsin, and he was assigned by the government to a job there, and we stayed there for several months, writing letters to home and sitting around doing practically nothing because he didn't get much time off. And I had a room with a young couple that had a new baby, and that was right up my alley. and actually it was to their benefit too, because they could go out and they knew I could take care of her. Her name was Betty Ray. He was stationed at a military base, but we rented a room for us when he was on leave, and we met. The people in the South are really, really nice, and I really had a good time there. I didn't work because our living situation wasn't that stable that I could leave and go work somewhere. So Don would go to whatever he was doing in the service, and I would stay home with a couple that I actually lived with. They were living in a house that was a duplex, and the house belonged to her aunt, and we rented the apartment, and she lived with us, and but it was a really different experience to live with people from the South. Are different, not completely different, but they have different ways about them, and they always wanted me to cook, so I'd make some Yankee gravy, which I didn't even know it was Yankee gravy. It was just plain gravy to me. But anyway, I did most of the cooking because they liked the gravy that made from whatever meat we had. And we stayed there not a year.
Can you tell me about how you met Grandpa, Don?
Mm-hmm. Well, he lived in Long Lake, and I lived in Maple Plains, so it's not too far away. Mm-hmm. And we went to the same church. The Presbyterian church was in Long Lake and also in Maple Plain. And so we belonged to the same young people's group. And it was winter time, and my friend Lois and I went out on what do you call it now? When you go out in the winter? Sleigh ride. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is true. We went on a sleigh ride with all the young people, and at that time, the Long Lake and the Maple Plain kids used to. We all went to the Presbyterian church. There was in Long Lake, and ours is in Maple Plain. But sometimes we do things like sleigh rides and stuff together, and that happened to be one of the nights. And we were on a sleigh ride, and somebody kept pulling us off. We walked the whole dang way because it was so dark we really couldn't see who it was. But they kept pulling us off of the sleigh, and so we had to walk and walk and walk. When we got back to the church, we made a mental note that we were going to see who was wearing an all-leather coat that was shiny, and you could, when you got into the light, you could recognize it. And we went in. We were at a Maple Plain church, both the Long Lake and the Maple Plain bunch, and we realized that it was Don Cole and what was that other kid's name? Well, anyway, another boy from Long Lake that had been doing it. And so we said, we know who you are, And that was how I met Don. And we just continued going with the kids from Long Lake. We got to know them pretty well. Don's friend was Rossi Nielsen, and we went out with them, the two of them. I did anyway. I can't remember. Well, I think my girlfriend Lois Peterson was the other one that went with them. One night we were driving along, and we got to Excelsior, and that was an amusement park.
Okay.
And in getting out of it, Don noticed a dent in the fender of the car that he was driving, and he didn't know what he was going to do about that because his dad drove it every day to work, and he wasn't too sure that it wasn't his dad that did it because he was known to drink a little and drive a little. But anyway, the dad said no, that he didn't do it, it must have been Don. And so then he was afraid he wasn't going to get to use the car very much, but his dad didn't press the issue.
Did you and Grandpa, did you kind of go on dates together, just the two of you? What kind of things would you two do outside of the church group?
Oh no, we didn't go as a church group.
No.
That was just where we met because
Okay.
he was from Long Lake.
So then what did you two do together?
Oh, when we went on dates? Well, we mainly went to, we usually went with another couple, and that was my friend Lois Peterson, and whoever happened to be dating her that night. and we went to the movies, and sometimes our two churches had meetings together, so we went to those, and we got to know the kids from Long Lake, better that way than we would have otherwise, because dating that was just a couple or maybe two couples, but not the whole young people's group. It wasn't too easy to get a date because the cars are mostly driven by your parents, and Don's dad had to have his car every day because he drove to Minneapolis to work, and so he had to ask way ahead of time, and he wasn't ever very sure about getting the car, but as it worked out pretty good. He was quite sympathetic toward our plight without a separate car to drive or a way to go to the movies is mainly what we did. And so where was I? But we were dating quite often, and finally Don and his friend Rossi Nielsen got together what change they had and bought a car themselves.
Yeah.
And so then we had transportation more easily than we did to use his dad's car, because he was always so nervous about that car, and rightly so, because his dad had to have it for work the next day. And that went on for quite a while till the guys were called up into service and they had to leave.
So then what happened?
Well, he just had to leave. He went to Wisconsin, to a town where almost all the kids that were drafted showed up there, and then they split them up and sent them to different places for where the soldiers were being in. They called it, what did they call it? Being in induced into the Army or the Navy, or just they would be sent to a certain headquarters where it would either be Navy or Air Force or just plain Army. Lois and I always we double dated, or else we'd find a way to get to the movies by ourselves, by somebody else, or my dad would take us. But transportation wasn't very easy, and gas was rationed, and yeah, we were pretty grateful for what chance we did have to go out.
Can you tell me about your wedding, Grandma?
I didn't have a wedding.
So
We went to Wisconsin and were married.
You kind of eloped?
No, my folks knew we were going. But my brother Bob and Dot went with us. And they were our witnesses.
Oh, okay.
If you went to a minister to get married, you had to have something signed by him that he had witnessed your marriage. And we did that when we were married. And then we started traveling because he was assigned to California. And our first trip to California, we stayed with Aunt Luella and Uncle Millie and Paul. And they lived in California in, it was Los Angeles by and large, on the edges of the city. And they lived in an apartment. And at first I stayed with them, and they had a davenport that opened out into a bed, and I slept there. And then I got an apartment of my own. And then Don was reassigned, and we went to California and stayed there for about a month. And then I can't really remember all the places that he was sent to. But wherever he went, I went, and we found an apartment.
What made Grandpa so special? What did you love about him so much?
He was his own boss, for one thing. He could plan ahead. He was capable of paying the bills, and he was smart.
Yeah.
Let's see. Well, Kathy was born on 1946, and she would be our first child.
How did you come up with her name?
Kathy?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I wanted a short name, and I wanted it to be somewhat musical, and I named her Kathy Carol Cole. And of course, until she was born, we didn't know it was a girl or a boy, and Don was rooting for a boy. So when she was born, it was somewhat of a disappointment to him, but I was happy. And I was the one that was with her most of the time because he was on assignment.
Then who was your next child to be born?
Gregory.
How'd you come up with his name?
Oh, I don't know. Gregory. Well, there was a movie star, Gregory, and well, I guess I thought it went with Cole pretty good. Gregory Charles Cole. And Charles was Don's dad's name.
Okay.
And I guess I felt somewhat obliged to work a name in there that would represent Don's family. Then it was several years before Donnie. Well, I think no.
About Lucinda.
Cindy was the last one.
She was the last
baby.
one.
I think. Maybe not. Oh no, I'll have to ask how old they are and then I'll know.
Lucinda is such a pretty name. Where did you come up with that?
That was Don's grandmother's name.
Yeah?
Grandma, let me think, what was her last name now? They lived in Long Lake on the road to Long Lake on a farm. And her name was Lucinda Cox. And I just took the Lucinda and put Carol with it.
You mean Jane?
Huh?
You mean Jane?
Lucinda?
Jane?
Yeah, that's it. Jane went better, yeah.
Yeah, Carol was Kathy's middle name.
Yeah, that's right.
Would you say that you had good children?
Oh,
They
yes.
well behaved?
Absolutely. Yep, they were really good kids.
How was Don as a father? Was he a good dad?
Mhm. Mhm. Yep, he wasn't bossy. He was pretty understanding. He had friends in Long Lake that he, as a boy, they were sort of like a tribe, and he knew all the kids in Long Lake, and he understood why they wanted to go out together and stuff like that. So there was really there was no strife.
Did you and your children, did you guys have family dinners? Like, did you guys eat as a family typically?
Yep.
Every night?
Mm-hmm.
What's something that makes you proud of your children?
Well, number one, they never got into any serious trouble. I never caught them in a lie. They were very obedient and very, especially Kathy, of course, very conscientious of what they did and how they fit into the family.
Did you guys go on any family vacations?
Oh yes, our family went on vacations.
You and Don and the kids?
Uh-huh. Well, mostly me and Don in the beginning, and Kathy maybe. But Don and I always went on a summer vacation.
Where would you go?
Oh, probably Wisconsin, or maybe Michigan. Well, we went to California too. My aunt and uncle, my Aunt Luella and Uncle Millie lived in California, and they just lived in a little apartment. But I talked to her on the telephone, I think it was, and I told her we were coming to California, and come and stay with us. And they were working. Like they would go to work late afternoon and work evening, and then they'd come home early in the morning and sleep a while. And so it was really a kind of a different arrangement. But they were happy to have us come and stay there. Don was at the Air Force base mostly, but he would get weekends off sometimes, and then he'd stay there with us. We didn't stay real long. He got reassigned. I don't think we were even there a month, and he got reassigned to California. And well, that's where we had been too, but we got assigned to San Francisco. And that was the last that we stayed with Luella and Millie.
Do you remember when you first became a grandma?
Well, let me see. I'm sure I do, but I just can't dig it up. It was Kathy's child, of course. I can't remember anything about it, except that it was.
You like being a grandma though, right?
Oh yeah, I'm nuts about babies.
What do you like best about being a grandma?
Well, I guess it's because they take them home at night.
You like to babysit them?
Well, I can't remember now. They're getting so old. I haven't done any of that for a long time.
No.
But yeah, I liked. I'd always babysit if they needed me.
You've got quite a few grandchildren, don't you? Do you know how many?
Yeah, I got 16.
What about
I
great-grandchildren?
have 15 grandchildren and 16 great-grandchildren.
That's quite a few.
Yeah, it is.
You like to spoil your grandchildren?
I don't think I've ever had a chance.
No?
I mean, they've never stayed with me any great long time, or.
No, but when they came over.
Oh yeah, but that wasn't spoiling them. That was just coming to Grandma's house.
Do you remember when I was born?
Not really. I don't.
Remember, it was in 1993. Remember, my mom Heather was just a teenager.
Oh yes, she was pretty close to high school.
Yeah, she was still in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I remember her telling me that she was kind of nervous about telling you and Grandpa. Do you remember how you felt when she told you that she was going to have a baby?
It was a natural thing. When you got boyfriends and no, they were good kids. There was nothing to worry about. You know, I had 16 grandchildren and 17 great-grandchildren, something like that. It was lots. But it came gradually.
But Grandpa passed away when he was like 72, wasn't he?
Oh, I think he might have been 73.
73. That had to have been a difficult time for you, huh?
Huh?
That had to have been a difficult time for you, huh?
Well, he wasn't real strong or real well for quite a while, and his whole male family had died of heart problems, so it was just sort of something you knew was going to happen. I just lived it because he started having his doctor started, treating him for heart trouble. And we just one day at a time. But it didn't last. I mean, it wasn't fatal. And maybe that was, no doubt, an answer to prayer. Because I didn't want him to die. And he had a good heart specialist. And an answer to prayer. You get those once in a while and you forget to count them.
What do you miss most about Grandpa?
What do I miss most? Just his presence. Just, miss having him around. Although, you get used to it. He was still busy with his business, while we were married, so it wasn't like he was home all the time or anything. He was come and go. He went to work every morning. He was dedicated to his business. Talking to the gals that were left in the office and everything, he was a good boss. It's a funny time of life to go through when your husband goes away to work and comes home every night, and then the rest of the day is yours to buy groceries and all that. But he was a good husband and a good father. And I think he was young enough so that he understood the position of the kids, They were only 16 or so when they were asking for the car and all that. But he was young enough himself to understand some of the feelings there. Because he was very generous, I think. And he always compared their problems with the ones he had himself, and so he was more understanding. Well, that's kind of handy if you can put yourself in their place. I think you come about a better understanding of what's happening, and then you forget it. You get them through one pressure after the other, and finally everything smooths out.
Do you have faith in God, Grandma?
I bet.
Do you have faith in God?
Oh, of course. I have complete faith in God.
So do you look forward to seeing Grandpa again?
Oh, sure. I can see him now. When I'm going to sleep at night, I can close my eyes and see him. How about you? Can you remember your grandpas?
A little bit. I mean, my grandpas are still alive, so I get to see them quite a bit, but Grandpa Cole I have a couple little memories of, but mostly because of pictures.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's the way I remember them, too.
Did you take a lot of pictures of your kids?
No, not a lot. At that time, picture taking, well, I don't know if picture taking is so popular now, but there's certain times of your life that you're all getting together and you take pictures and then you kind of forget it.
When did you buy this cabin?
Ugh. I don't know.
Did you and Grandpa buy it together?
Yeah. But I can't think even what all led up to it. Somebody else owned it. Not the cabin, but just the property.
Well, you bought that cabin over next door first, didn't you?
Yes. That went with it. It was a wreck. What
kind of memories do you have here?
Well, it's been kind of fun because we built this.
Yeah.
And we had room enough for others to come and stay, and that little place came in handy. A little cabin. And Don liked it at the lake. I think that may be because his grandmother had a place at the lake, at Long Lake. His grandmother had property on Long Lake, and I don't know, I think they maybe had a cabin on it because he was there a lot. And he skated across that lake to where her cabin was, because he lived on the other side of Long Lake from where the cabin is. So, I mean, from where they would get on the lake from his grandmother's place. So that lake was a pretty big part of his youth, because he was terribly fond of his grandmother, and she had the place on the lake. And he had 2 drunken uncles, and so he would go over there real often, because they would straighten out if he was around. You know, they knew that he was youth, and they knew better. And so Grandma Green was always happy to have him come, because things straightened out for her better. He walked across the lake to go to his grandmother's.
Did you do much swimming in the lake in the summer?
Oh, yeah. They would. They'd put on their suits under their clothes, and they'd swim in their suits, and then they'd walk home and put on some dry clothes. And the lake was right there for them. I don't know if you know where Don's house was, where he lived. It's right up from Main Street, about a block. His house is. And so he could walk down to the store, and it was a pretty handy place to live. He went to the Presbyterian church. That's how I met him, is our youth groups, you know, were together often, because of the same minister and everything had a youth group, and we'd meet together, and we got to know each other, and in the wintertime we'd go on sleigh rides. That's where we really met.
When did you learn how to drive?
Oh, let me think now. I was about 15, and I had a boyfriend that lived just next door to us. His name was Ebert, Gordon Ebert. And his mother was a widow, and she had 4 kids to raise. Gordon and Donald and 2 girls. Not too sure about their names. Lois, I think, was one, and can't remember the 4th one. But anyway, his mother took in washing and ironing. And when she got it done, then Gordon had to deliver it. And she had I think hers was a Model A car, which had more room to take the washing in. But later on, they had a Model T. And I often think about it, because she was immaculate. She had a washing that was immaculate. She would iron it, and then she would carefully put it in this wash basket, you know, and then we'd put it in this Model T car that went, every bumper went, whoop, whoop. By the time we got delivered that, I had a hard time making it look like it was done, but I did. Anyway, I tried to keep it decent until we got to where we were delivering it. Several people have asked me about that.
So
I don't know how we ever got by with it, but we did.
So did he teach you how to drive that?
No, let me think now. It was a Model T. Yeah, he taught me, but I did learn on my dad's car too.
Did you like to drive?
Got you places.
Was it a manual? Like you had to shift it into gear?
Yeah, you had to step on the clutch and.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's about all there was then. Till Don got his first car. It was automatic. he gathered together all the money he made from newspapers, and he delivered newspapers, and he worked at the Buckhorn. Do you remember the Buckhorn? It was a building that stood right on 12. As you were just about to leave Long Lake, that was the Buckhorn, and he worked there serving food, and what else did they do? He often had 2 jobs when he was a teenager. I didn't know him then, but he did. He had 2 jobs. He caddied for the golfers, and he worked at the Buckhorn, serving everything that they served. They had dinners and beer and everything. And that was his 2 major jobs that he was working at when we first started dating. When we first started dating, his friend, I can't remember who it was, used to come and get me. And then we'd go pick up Don at the Buckhorn. And he'd come out all dressed up. And, I mean, he'd have a suit coat on and a shirt and tie and all that. He always dressed, well, I shouldn't say always, but for a long time. You could expect him to come out all dressed. But then when he got his own car, that was it. He got his own car, and he would come to my place and get me. And at that time, we were a little bit cautious about everything because my dad had an eagle eye. Sometimes, if one of his friends would be driving, they'd come and pick me up at my friend Lois Peterson's house, and then we'd squish down in the car until we got by my place. But my dad knew every time. He was just one of those eagle eye guys. Well, he was in the store. He could see every vehicle that passed, even though we were stooped down into the car so he couldn't see us. But he'd tell me, "I saw you go by."
Were you not supposed to be going out with?
No, it was all right. I just, well, they didn't like it when we rode in the car a lot. They were afraid that we'd have an accident. And so when we go zooming by my dad's store and he'd see us, he worried some. But parents worry.
What was the first big purchase that you and Don made as a married couple?
Car, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. I had bought some furniture because my folks had an apartment right next to the store, and I was renting that, and so I bought a dining room set and some living room furniture and a stove for the kitchen, and that I bought with money I had earned being a waitress in Minneapolis on Broadway. And at that time, the smell I took home from work was smoke. Everybody smoked in the restaurants, and to this day, I don't like the smell of cigarette smoke. But I didn't smoke myself, but I didn't object to a guy if he smoked. Don smoked.
He did?
Mm-hmm.
His whole life, or his whole life?
Well, he doesn't smoke now.
Well, no, not now.
Yeah, most of his life he smoked. It wasn't like one cigarette after the other type of thing, though. But he carried him in his shirt pocket, along with the matches.
Once all of your kids moved out of the house, what would you and Grandpa do for fun?
For fun.
Yeah.
Stay home. Trying to think about the kids, where we lived when they moved out of the house. I guess we lived in my dad's building, along the side there, an apartment.
Can you tell me about this picture, Grandma?
That picture?
Who's in that picture?
What do you want to know about it?
Who is that?
This is Marion, that's Don's younger sister.
Oh, okay.
He's 10 years older than she. This is his sister Evelyn. She's 10 years older than he.
Wow.
So there's a big span. There's 30 years there.
Are they the only three in the family?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That is very spread out.
Yeah.
He's pretty handsome.
Yep, he was handsome. Of course, if you want to know, you just ask him.
He was pretty confident?
Yeah, he was confident. He was smart. He knew his math, you know. That's pretty important in your grown-up life, to know your math. And he was very conscientious. When he got a job, well, when we got married, Don Anderson had his business then. Don Anderson had a business, I should say. So he said, well, if you get married, I got a job for you. So, I mean, that wasn't depending upon getting married, but he knew that that we were planning on getting married. And so he first worked for Don Anderson, but he just about broke his neck to get to a position where he could go and work for somebody else. It's no fun working for your relatives.
Yeah.
But he did well. Can't remember how it was. He had a friend who had a friend that had a business that he wanted to sell. And when Don started working in that type of business, Dan Hamachek moved a few bricks to get him a job with this guy. And it worked. He worked for, can't remember the guy's name, but he worked for him and he made him his chief man in construction business. And that was a break for Don. And it was a break for the other guy too, because he was a good employee. He always had his mind on making money.
Grandpa did?
Mm-hmm. Even when he had his own business, he still kept close track of money coming in and the money going out and the people he hired.
Can you describe Grandpa in one sentence? How would you describe Grandpa to somebody who didn't know him?
You know what frugal means?
Yeah.
That was Grandpa. Although he was kind, he was generous, he was quiet, he was thoughtful. Of course, now that he's dead, he was everything. Oh, he was a good father, though. I think the kids would back me up on that.
Do you know the meaning of your family name, Grandma?
Heavens, no, I never heard of it. Schultz?
Yeah.
No,
Or
I've
the
seen
heritage?
it in movies and whatnot, and it's German. That's about all I know about it.
Do you know where your families come from? Germany and anywhere else?
Well, my father's family came from Germany.
Okay. What about your mom's?
No, my mom was born in Minneapolis, and let's see, Grandma and Grandpa Bud, they lived out in Maple Plain when in my grandfather's young days. His family was out in Maple Plain. I don't know of any other place that they came from. I'm sure they did, but they never emphasized it at all.
No. Have you ever had any nicknames as a child or an adult?
Oh, yeah, Meredith. Meredith Rettinger worked for us when I was a little girl, and she took care of Dick and me both, and she called me Deloris. That was the only nickname I can remember.
Yeah? Grandpa didn't have any nicknames for you?
No. Mm-mm.
So it's pretty much always Dolores?
Yep. Or Deloris. They a lot of times wouldn't put the IS on it, just call it I.
Do you like your name?
Deloris. And when I got to high school, they called me Schultze.
Yeah?
My friends did.
Do you think you're anything like your mother?
Me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes, I think so.
Yeah?
I don't know who else I'd take after.
How do you think you're like her?
Well, I think I'm a happy person and try to be kind to other people, and that's about it.
Do you think you're anything like your father?
No, my father was he was, I don't know how to describe people. He was kind, and he liked jokes, and he liked to be funny once in a while, but mostly he was straight ahead.
What do you think was most important to your parents, like their values?
Being honest with their business, being fair, they also looked out after people. My mother was one that she could spot somebody if they were having family troubles or something. She would always be intending to help them if she could, without being butting into their business, but just if she knew they had a lot of little children, she'd probably send extra groceries home with them, something like that, because she knew that was one place she could help.
Do you feel that you're like any of your grandparents?
What was the question?
Do you feel like you are like some of your grandparents?
Some of my grandparents. Well, I'd like to say I was like my mother's mother, because she was a real sweetheart. But she was also sick. She had asthma and hay fever and everything that puts you down. So she had a real battle trying to stay well and in the play of things. But other than that, I didn't know my dad's family. They came from Germany, and we went to California when I was 6 and visited them. But that was the only time that I can remember being exposed to them. And my dad didn't dwell on his family. We went to visit him, and when we did, that was it.
Do you think any of your children are like you in any ways?
Like me?
Yeah.
Ooh, no, I don't think so.
No?
I think we're kind of
We look like
individuals, huh?
we look like you.
You do.
She looks just
Oh,
like
go
you.
on.
And sounds like you and writes like you. What do you think your 3 best qualities are?
I have to have 3?
You've got 3.
Well, I think one of my best qualities is I like everybody. I don't get into arguments or judge people. And let's see, I like babies. I like little kids. And I really like people. I like all people.
What do you think your 3 worst qualities are?
Worst?
I can't think of any, but
Well, I probably like to sleep too much. Not overly ambitious. Try to mind my own business.
which do you think you have the most of? Talent, intelligence, education, or persistence?
I guess maybe education. Since I went to high school, that was an education in my day, but now it's probably kindergarten.
Had you ever considered going to college?
No, my parents couldn't afford it, and I wasn't that good a student. I don't think college would have really helped me much.
Is there a career that you ever wanted to go into, or did you always plan on just
Nope,
being a mother?
I just wanted to be a mother. I like children, and I was always happy to help take care of them somewhere. When I got out of high school, that was mainly the way I made a living, was taking care of children. Not a very prosperous one, but I got to know the town.
If you could go back, would you do it any other way?
No, because I don't think that was the way in my day. It was a small town atmosphere, and you took care of kids as a way. And it was a small town, you know. I knew them all. My mother always knew where to call. Wherever there's the smallest, youngest baby, that's where I'd be. I was nuts about babies. Mostly nuts.
Do you have any special sayings or expressions that you like to go by?
Well, if I do, I can't think of them.
No.
Doesn't do any good to complain.
What?
It doesn't do any good to complain.
Yeah, it doesn't do any good anyway.
Nobody listens anymore.
Nobody listens.
Do you have a favorite book, Grandma?
Book?
Yeah. You
Oh,
do
I
much
guess
reading?
mostly the Bible stories would be my favorite book. I wasn't a very passionate reader.
No. Who are some people in history that you admire most?
I can't think of one.
No?
History never really interested me. I only did it because it was a subject to get some answers for, but I just lived for the day.
What about any presidents or leaders in your lifetime? Are there any that you
Well, because of
admire?
the stories you read about them, you get so that you respect them at least. But the usual ones, Abraham Lincoln and Washington and all the good presidents. I just kind of admire anybody that's in the government that has anything to say about it.
If you had 3 wishes, what do you think you'd wish for?
Things to stay just as they are. Because the only other thing that there is to look forward to is I'm getting to be the oldest in the family. Well, the next thing you know is death, but that doesn't worry me because I believe in Jesus, and I can die and it's okay.
So you don't think you really have anything to wish for then?
No, I got everything I need. In fact, I'm a lot luckier than some as far as, having a family, support a family around, and plenty of food, a chance to help others if it comes up. I like my church and all the leaders, and I'm happy.
Do you remember a memorable phone call that you've ever received?
Well, yes, I do.
What was it?
Don called from Hawaii when he was in the service, and I hadn't heard from him for quite a while. And Hawaii was quite a ways away for a phone call, but it worked really well. It was just like he was next door.
What did
My
he
mother
ever
was
say?
more excited than I was.
Yeah?
Yeah. Oh, gosh. She got so excited to get a phone call from Hawaii.
Do you remember what he was calling for?
Just to say he was there and see how things were at home, and that probably he would be coming home on a leave. That was always what was on our mind. When could he come home next? He'd probably have 5 days to visit. He would try to use his father. As luck would have it, his father couldn't drive for a while. He was, he was a drinker for one thing, but he was, I think maybe he had been stopped while he was driving, and then, they take away your license for a while. But Don could drive, so so he got the car more often than he usually did, and that was the only transportation we had. Couldn't even take a bus at that time.
What kind of things bring you the most pleasure now?
Say it again.
What kind of things bring you pleasure now?
Pleasure?
Yeah.
Well, I like to go to meetings that that come from friendships, like PTA, people I know. I was president of PTA at least once. And meetings that have to do with making things better for the kids, for teaching meetings or just fun, like the picnic at the end of the year. I always thought was fun at school. When school would end, they'd have a big picnic, and everybody was happy. Where other times, they'd be kind of giving credit to whoever instigated the picnic or whatever. But But the school picnic was instigated by the teachers and the principal, and some of the parents helped, to organize, and it was always a fun deal. And at that time, ice cream wasn't so popular as it is now. I mean, so common. They'd have ice cream. Algren's actually would bring one of those metal containers that stood about this high. They would bring one or two of those that would feed the whole school, and they would send a man to dip it, and they would send ice cream cones, for free, and they were always good for that end picnic for the school, and they were very generous. And we had, at that time then, we had Play Day. It was called Play Day. It was the last Play Day of the year. And it was always a fun picnic because they had lots of ice cream and cones, and just that was not a common thing for in my day. Ice cream and candy were not common. My dad had a store, so I was one of the lucky ones, but it wasn't. Play Day was about the only time that at school that we had any kind of treats. But of course it didn't bother me too much because my dad had a store. And he was very generous. He was very generous with me, and I try to be generous with all my friends. We didn't have much playtime though. We played under the bridge. It had long grass. We would go down in the dump. It was just across the road, down in the dump. And we'd get pots and pans and stuff that people threw out, and we'd drag them back under the bridge and play house. And we'd make tables and chairs out of broken chairs and things like that we got out of the dump. When I told my mother where I was playing and what I was playing with, she was not a happy camper, but it was fun. We had a good time.
Who would you play with when you did that?
Oh, Marlis Carlson, and her big sister was my best friend, but Marlis was my best person to play with because we were closer to the same age. And actually, I was between the two of them. I was older than Marlis, but younger than Betty. And we would play. They had, I think it was a room in their garage that was our playhouse. And we could put anything in there we wanted, play anything we wanted. And I would get, being my dad had the store, I was capable of bringing lots of things, and we played in that garage for 2 or 3 years, I think, till we went off to high school. Because we didn't have, the average person didn't have a car to go around in. The car was for the winner of the livelihood, like your dad or even your brothers could drive a car and fill their tank with gas and get to work. That was the main thought about when your kids got to teenagers, they were old enough to have a job. And so especially the boys, the girls used to help with housework and stuff like that, but the boys actually had jobs in stores, garages, things like that. They learned about cars, and then they could have a job in a garage. And anything that a man would do, the boys were trained to do. The girls were mainly babysitters and housekeepers. Dickie did too. We ran the town. We could go anywhere we wanted to, and my mother usually knew where to call if she wanted us to come home. Somebody'd look out the window, yep, they're out there, and they'd call out and say, your mother called and she wants you to come home now. And we go home. The whole town was our play yard. Knew everybody, and of course I always tried to go to wherever they had the smallest baby. I was just nuts about babies. And I had a lot of babysitting jobs when I got older. The town didn't seem so big.
How much would you get paid to babysit?
Oh, probably in the beginning 25 cents an hour or two. You didn't keep track of the time. They just gave you some change and you went home happy. And I didn't need the money like a lot of kids did, because we had the store, and my folks were very generous with Dick and I. My brother Harry and Bob were that much older that they weren't in the picture when we were growing up. They were already getting married and out of the house.
As an adult, what kind of things brought you pleasure?
As an adult?
Yeah.
Having my own children. I was nuts about babies, and didn't matter whose they were, but when they were my own, it was really special.
What kind of things bring you pleasure now that you're living here?
Oh, just living. Taking care of my family. Shopping. I've always liked life in Maple Plain. My folks had the store. That was special, because my dad would give me all the candy and gum and stuff like that I wanted. It got so that it wasn't even a treat anymore. It was just something we had at home. Dick and I both were very fortunate to live where our house was attached to the store, you know. Mm-hmm. And so we were always there, and anything in the store we could have, and consequently we didn't want anything. We knew we could have it, so why? It just wasn't that much of a treat. We lived in North Dakota when Don first was released from the Army, and it was a good life. He was an electrician then by that time. He was an electrician, or at least he said he was. I can't remember if they actually had licenses, but I think they did. I think they had some kind of control.
He had been an apprentice with
That's right.
Anderson's or something.
When he said he was going to go into the electric business, we were then just going off into the Army, and Don Anderson said, if you come back and you want to be an electrician, I've got a job for you. So when we came back, Don Anderson hired him as an electrician, and it was a good job. And so we lived in Maple Plain, and that's when we bought the farm, I guess.
And did you have animals at the farm?
Mm-hmm. We had little calves. You could get, farmers didn't want their little calves, especially if they were female, because they had...
No, boys.
Huh?
They didn't want the boys because they were milking the females. They didn't want the boy cows.
Oh, I guess maybe that... Well, they would raise them to be a certain age, and then they would send them to market. They'd come and get them with trucks and put them in the trucks, and we'd sell them as cattle. And Yeah, Kathy can probably tell you more about it than I can, because it really doesn't stick with me.
What kinds of things did you do on the farm?
Not much, just take care of the house and the kids and the food. Went to the grocery store and
You did a lot of canning. You had strawberries. You had beans.
oh yeah, we had strawberries out in the garden, yeah. And raspberries. What's that?
That's the washing machine.
Washing machine.
And then how about, tell them about Marlene's wedding Marlene and Dick's wedding on
Yeah, my brother Dick.
outside.
My brother Dick was going with Marlene. And they wanted to get married, and they did get married, and they went to Black Duck for their honeymoon. Do you know what Black Duck was? It was my dad's summer place. He had a little old cabin up there, and 10 acres of land, I think it was. And Dick and Marlene went there for their honeymoon. And as we're told, Dick shot mice with his pistol. They'd lay in bed and he'd shoot the mice running along the ceiling. I didn't witness it, but that was what Marlene said.
It was a basement only.
You what?
It was basement
Oh
only.
yeah, the cabin was a basement. My dad had dug a hole and laid blocks, and it was enclosed in blocks. And I don't know what he did for a roof, but he did put a top on it. And Marlene and Dick wanted to get married, and they wanted to stay up there for their honeymoon, and they did. They stayed up there, but it was very primitive. Had to go down the street a ways to a creek to get water, and it was really good well water. But yeah, that was the way you got it. You had to go after it with pails, and they spent their honeymoon there. And Marlene said, at night they laid in bed and he shot the mice on the wall with his pistol. And I guess that would probably be true. That's about what Dick would do.
And they had an outdoor wedding at the farmhouse.
Yeah, when they wanted to get married, they wanted to be married outside in our yard. So at the farmhouse, we set things up with a platform for the platform for the
stage.
minister to stand while they came up and were married, and it was a nice wedding outside. We got the chairs, I think, from the church and set them up in the yard, and
It rained all morning though.
yeah, it
was
didn't
July in the
seem like it was
90s.
going to be nice, but it did. The sun came out later in the day.
The sauna.
And Marlene had a satin dress. You know how satin is.
Clean.
Long sleeved with buttons. Her grandmother had made it with buttons all the way up. I can imagine how hot that was to get in. We had help shove her arm into the sleeve and get her into that dress. And it was so hot. It was in the 80s, I'm sure. But it was an outdoor wedding, and the minister from the what's that called? Seventh-day Adventist Church? I don't know.
I
Anyway,
have no idea what church who the minister was.
he came and married them.
The Presbyterian church minister?
No, it was the well, what did they call it
Different
now?
church,
It was a
community church?
yeah,
Community church.
the minister. Yep.
Well, and then you had picnics, you had family gatherings.
I did. Yep.
Chelsea's wedding.
Chelsea's wedding.
Yeah, Chelsea's wedding in the big tent out in the yard. With a full
I had
band.
forgotten that.
Yeah.
We had a big house with a big yard.
We had horses. You had
Two.
horses?
I think
Well,
I think 2 is the most we ever had.
2 2 at a time. We had like 5 or 6.
Yeah,
Through
but
the
only
years.
2. And they got to be, when the horses got to think they were smarter than we were, Don would get rid of them and get some different ones. Yeah, we had fun. We had the kind of farm we had wanted. Wasn't milking cows, I'll tell you. It was young horses.
Chickens.
Oh yeah.
Tell them about
Kathy was the only one that was willing to stick her arm in there and feel if there was any eggs in the nest. Greg was so afraid of them that if you just put your hand on his shoulder, he'd jump because he'd think it was the chicken or something. Get him. He was a real chicken, but he was younger. He was 2 years younger than Kathy, so he let Kathy be the brave one. She was.
Well, tell them about the pig, the sow that got out.
I'm talking about doing what your father wanted you to do. You
Yeah,
were his.
But I'm saying,
Yep.
tell them about the sow.
Oh yeah, Greg
sows and the-
talked, baby talk, sort of. And about one of the main things he could say is, the sow's out, and we had to go get it and put it back in. It was one of those that could push anything. If you put something up for a door, a pig's nose and neck is so strong, it could push anything away that we put out there.
And how did you get it back in?
Well, mostly Kathy put it back in. Oh, that's right. We had a pail that fed the animals, and all we had to do was put something in that and rattle it, and they'd come a-running because they thought they were going to get fed. That's the way we got them to gather. By course of habit, I've forgotten most all of that. Greg was, 2 years younger than you? Scared to death of all the farm animals.
Until it came time for horses.
Huh?
Until it came time for horses
Yeah.
and he got a little older.
We got horses. He got older, like she said. He could jump on the horse from behind, you know. He'd run, put his hands on his butt, and put himself in the saddle. I mean, I think he'd have broke his neck trying to show us that he could do that.
Watching the Lone Ranger and
Yeah,
Cisco Kid and all those cowboy movies.
he could do it. But that was the way he got any respect from us.
Well, and for him that was a real feat because he was not an athletic person.
Yeah.
So for him to be able to jump on the back of the horse was major, really major.
And come from behind
Yeah.
to jump on it. So he'd have to have his hands on that butt to lift himself over to get into the saddle position, you know. But we didn't give much credit for it. But I was glad he could do something that would get him some praise. He needed it. He was a wimpy little boy.
He was a musician. He was a deep thinker.
Well, the kids had a good time on the farm.
Mm-hmm.
They brought anybody home from school, why? They played outside and wherever they could find. They'd make forts out in the pasture with whatever they could find to make a playhouse type of thing. And they got so they could put the saddle on the horse themselves. I really didn't like it down here till we had the cabin.
This cabin.
Mm-hmm.
For good reason.
Hmm?
For good reason. The other cabin had no potty, no running
yeah.
water, no washing machine.
But anyway, it was a different life, but it was not unpleasant. It was a great life. I did my duty. Ours was a very peaceful life. We really weren't feisty. Crazy. I considered my whole life was really fortunate. I was happy and healthy all the time.